Okay, it says you are live. Good morning. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Joan Jack. It's up there in the corner. Pretty good, eh? And so I think I'll start where I'm just waiting for my guest this morning. Our guest this morning is Marcella Fontaine. She's from the Saugeen First Nation in Manitoba, and she's going to be about 5 minutes, she said. So I'll just talk until she gets here. I'm nervous this morning. I don't know why. Um, those of you that know me know that I'm not really nervous to speak in public. I get nervous, but then it goes away. But I'm very nervous this morning. Maybe it's the subject matter, but I think I'll start with sharing because some of you may be listening for the first time where Brave Indigenous Conversations came from. I was in some professional development training with Landmark Worldwide, and I met Shannon Lee, and her and I basically our worldviews collided. And I was saying previously that I'm not really conflict averse, so we worked through the conflict and came out the other side as really good friends. She's like a heart sister to me now, and we're learning from each other. I'd like to welcome our viewers. There's a couple of you on already. That's great. I'm learning about all this. And so, anyways, I'm rambling already. Ramble. Um, for years, I've had the desire to speak, and of course, I want to be heard. But it's more about I feel like I've got something to say, and I'm sure many of you feel that way too. And there's only certain situations where you can speak freely or frankly, because there's costs of doing that and risks associated with doing that. Good morning, Tabitha. Aw. So I can see some of the listeners pop on. I think Tabitha's listening on YouTube, which is great because now I can see, I'm learning as I go how this works. Anyway, a few years ago, someone said to me, I was beaking off about something with them, and they were like, "Oh my God, you're a female Joe Rogan." And I was like, "What is that?" And so I Googled it. It was like, "Oh my goodness. Um, this guy has 14.7 million followers and is having a global impact." And I was like, that's interesting. But I do a lot of volunteer work, so I wasn't really interested in doing more volunteer work, particularly. And then we're driving a Whitehorse about a month ago, maybe now, and I listened to a lot of podcasts. Well, I listened to maybe 3 or 4 loyally. They really speak to me. So I was listening, and then I got direction basically, that I should do a podcast, and I realized why I should do it. And I've put in the bottom corner, because I'm learning how to use this technology, the link to our land-based healing camp. And my husband and I have been going down the Nakana River, I don't know, since I got here, like since 92, 93. And we're getting ready now to head out to the season. You can go to our website, and then there's a link there to our Facebook page where you can follow. And I go live quite often down there and show you what we're up to. Like if we're cleaning fish, my daughter Lonnie comes down. She came down last year and did a few lives. Whatever we're doing, the guys are at the boat. Oh, I think Marcella's here. Okay. I'm going to
late.
There we go. Okay, we did it, Marcella.
Yeah.
I can hear you. So I was just introducing my podcast and, rambling on. And so what I've done with the last 2 episodes is invited people that my guests, to just introduce themselves and share why you wanted to be here. And then we're just going to visit till we're done.
Okay. Big H, Joan. My name is Marcella Fontaine, and I'm Anishinaabe from the Saugeen First Nation. My education background is I have a PhD in business in Western terms, and within my culture, traditions, I'm still learning, practice our ceremonies, can speak the language. And in the last probably 25 years, I've been heavily involved in economic development, I've done a lot of work on language and culture, as well as doing evaluations, doing uh, environmental scans in the area of CFS
Mm.
and community development. So I always say I have a rounded background. And
Mhm.
I'm a mother to three daughters and a grandmother to eight.
Mm.
And so yeah, I'm I'm here.
I'm amazing. So when we were talking in Messenger, you'd said that you wanted to talk about lateral violence and sneaky jealousy. You said I found your use of the word sneaky jealousy really interesting, and I was like, hell yeah, let's talk about that.
Yes.
So why don't you start, and we'll just talk about that for a while, and maybe we'll talk about other things.
Okay. Well, I reached out to Joan to speak about some experiences that I've been, faced with over probably the last, 5 to 10 years. And one of the issues that I faced in the workplace has been, a lot of lateral violence and the issue. And I use the term jealousy because it has come out. And, elders have told me to continue on my path and take the high road when we know, as especially as women, how much harder it is within our environments, whether organizations or communities, that there is jealousy. And one of the things that I've learned is I don't share my background that much. I don't talk about my education. I would rather stay in the back because of that reason. I'm not one
Mhm.
to highlight or talk about, my education or um, the work that I've done. Only if I have to. I was a professor with the University College of the North. Many years ago, I had a very loving mentor, Marie Smallface Maruli. She's passed on now, but I just loved her dearly because she really pushed me to
Mhm.
attain the highest level of Western education. And she was a very strong woman, politically, academically, and she just said it like it was. So she actually gave me my first job and told me that, I should go on and teach. And she provided me with that opportunity.
Mhm.
And within that setting, I saw a lot of individuals who would compete, right? And normally that's not our nature
Mhm.
as Anishinaabe people or as Indigenous people. So I found it very interesting. But through the years, um, when I worked up in the PA at UCN, I saw the same thing happening among our students, and especially within our young women, and would, just advise them, just, take the high road, continue what you're doing. And then, noticed a lot of lateral violence between, it was subtle at first, but I actually had two students quit the program, the business admin program, because of that very reason. And it really it affected me because I thought,
Mhm.
these students have potential, but why should they have to go through that?
Mhm.
And they were two young women, and they just decided, that's it, I'm done.
Mhm.
So, but it's, as individuals overall, we should be supporting, we should be united, um, and it's time for the next generation to come along and
Mhm.
to pick up and learn from those experiences, and should not be faced with, any type of lateral violence or jealousy or envy or whatever, an individual terms it.
Mhm.
But I've also been told, and my personal experience is, don't tell anybody, that you have a PhD, or don't tell anybody that, all of this work you've done. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, why? I'm proud of that because I accomplished that, on my own with the support of, my family pushing me. And so I really haven't done that. I haven't, talked about that openly. And for me, yes, probably using the term doctor, Fontaine in front of my name would help, right? But that's not me. Um, and I'm very proud that I was able to complete my PhD as a single parent and instill, that role model for my daughters. And my youngest daughter has an MSW in Indigenous knowledge. And now I'm encouraging her to, go on for a PhD. She works in the area of healthcare. So, but and the reason, that I bring this up is because of what my daughter is experiencing right now with, the non-Indigenous women who are continuously attacking her. And the amount of lateral violence that she goes through in the workplace is unbelievable. And we shouldn't have to deal with that.
So,
Oh, go
so
ahead.
do you see? No. Do you see the lateral violence? Like you use the word non-Indigenous now. Do you see the lateral violence we experience as coming only from the non-Indigenous people in our workplaces, or okay, talk about that a bit. Like maybe some people don't even know what lateral violence is. Like
Yeah.
it's a new term. It's the new buzzword in Indian country.
Yes.
So I don't. How do you define lateral violence?
Well, lateral violence to me is, negative comments, negative actions, and demonstrating behaviors that are not, conducive to, say, how you treat people with respect, right? Or kindness.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a continuous, to me, it's a negative, toxic action. And, unfortunately, it happens in our communities, it happens in our organizations. And most people will walk away from that
Mm-hmm.
because they just don't want to deal with it, right? And lately, I haven't had the energy to deal with it either, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, I've experienced where people will act, that they're very concerned or that you're their friend, and then 10 minutes later they're stabbing you in the back.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I've gone through where people will say, well, don't use her, or, you can get a better
Mm-hmm.
consultant. You know, she doesn't know what she's talking about. Things like that. There's no need for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as Indigenous women, especially, we have to support one another, and we have to, really walk our talk.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not perfect, but I do, support a lot of women, and
Mm-hmm.
especially our younger women,
Mm-hmm.
and I've mentored quite a few, and I rarely talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I just tell them, take the high road, and, just continue on with your job,
Mm-hmm.
and don't worry about that because you know that you're doing a good job.
Couple of things come to mind when you're sharing. I think there's a couple of things at play. For example, what I'm thinking is, for those of you who aren't Anishinaabe, and I'm not fluent, but I have enough of our language that I can get by, and I've also engaged in a lot of discussions with fluent speakers around the concepts by which we should live.
Mm.
And one of the words you hear in our communities, Anishinaabe communities, especially from older people, when you're a young person who's upset about something, people will say mano, mano,
Yeah.
mano. And so mano, my understanding of mano is like it's the concept of Well, in the 12-step programs, they say pause when agitated, and so it's the concept of not taking rash action. Like, just let it go for now. Like, um, I get all kinds of understanding from that concept. Like, there's things that you have to consider before you take action, Joan. You need to just press the pause button, and then I think that factors into our response to the lateral violence as well. And then the other thing you raised was that we're not naturally inclined to be competitive. Like, we don't want to compete with our Danoe Maganak, like with our relatives. Like, it's not a it's not a thing for us to be okay with competing with our relatives. So there's some Indigenous concepts at play intuitively in each of us, I think. And then you add on that the legalized racism and generational colonial impact of being oppressed and being raised and taught by the outside world to think that you're not good enough. So we don't really do too much about it when someone's behaving wrong. So that gives rise to, what do we do in the communities when this is happening? Like, the lateral violence is very and then we make up stories like the crab in, oh, it's just the Indian way, the crab in the bucket syndrome. That's how we are. We just pull each other back down. That's just bullshit. I don't even think that's an Indigenous idea, to pull someone back down into the bucket. Like, that's not our way.
Mm-hmm.
But that idea, that analogy is being used as a way of justifying mano. Like, that's just the way we are. No, that's not just the way we are. I was wondering, what are your thoughts about what I just said about the Indigenous concepts colliding with our colonial experience?
Well, you're right. When people, my grandmother used to say that all the time, mano, you know, because my experiences with, my grandmother and aunts, uncles was, they always said, when you do wrong to somebody, it comes back to you.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to be very careful, in how you react to things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And you are raised in a kind, loving environment, right? But things happen.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing about our communities is that, we attack other families.
Mm-hmm.
We, say, okay, these people, they get everything, or, they have the political clout. So that comes out as well, loud and clear.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when we talk about, the indigenous, non-indigenous way, they, and I've experienced this as well, policies and procedures. If
Mm-hmm.
there is, bullying, there's lateral violence in the workplace, the first thing that's done is that a letter of complaint is written, right? And they take that route. So it's like a legal route, right? Where whatever, organization it is, they will tell you, you have to follow the policy and procedure manual. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
in our communities, our organizations, I mean, some of them are starting to use it, but they take matters into their own hands, right? And I'm going to be honest, it gets political.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how the decision is made when you are dealing with bullying or lateral violence. And unfortunately, some don't see the seriousness of it. And they say, okay, let it go. So
Mm-hmm.
that's, one of the big differences that I see. And then
Mm-hmm.
there's retaliation, there's revenge,
Mm-hmm.
where, some people will go hard and go after, an individual. And I've seen that as well. So within our communities, there has been a lot of changes, and there's no longer that the going to the elders for advice, or sitting down with the elders and saying, how can we deal with this, how can we approach this.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that I've been saying for a long time, and have shared this with a lot of other women, is that the there's no acknowledgement of our grandmothers, the
Mm,
older grandmothers that we have right now.
mm,
And to me, the grandmothers were the strongest ones in our community and still are.
mm,
But
mhm,
they're left out.
mm,
And you know, it's unfortunate because
mhm,
in my community and from my experiences, those old ladies were strong. And they, when they provided advice, or if you want to call it counseling, or just talking to people, they had an impact.
mm,
And it was they who were part of that decision making process,
mhm,
and you listen to them.
mhm,
But in my opinion, that's gone.
mhm,
I haven't seen that, you know um, in our community anyway, for a very long time. And
mhm,
hopefully that changes soon.
mhm,
And it's not only women, but it's also men
mhm,
that are going through some of these things as well.
mhm.
Yeah.
I was wondering too, like I wanted to tell you that we're just getting to know each other more this last maybe 5 6 years. Actually, through my daughter Lonnie and her
Yes.
activities with her farming and stuff, gave us a chance to connect, and I'm so grateful. And I want you to know that you occurred for me as supportive all the time, always supportive and humble. Like I mean, I think you should shout from the treetops that have your PhD and you're Dr. Fontaine. However, like you say, that's not really, it's not culturally appropriate. And
Mm.
also, it's frowned upon, and then it attracts jealousy, and there's all kinds of reasons why. So I just found out this morning that you have your PhD. Like, congratulations! Like, that's amazing. Um, Geez, I lost my thought. I was going to say there. Well, random thoughts here. There are some I know at Minigo CP. I think I'm saying it right at Pine Creek. I know they're with Chief Nepanak and his council. They have done work to bring in a grandmother's council, and
Oh,
not
great.
sure. I'm not sure the extent of the role of that, but I see the posts sometimes, and I'm like, right on. And in other places in BC, for example, they're looking at the matriarchs, and there's discussion about what does it mean to be a matriarch. It came back. One of the struggles that I've had. I think instead of asking you, I think there's a correlation between how strong a woman is and how and the response from the community. Strong and intelligent Indigenous women are not. Misogyny outside our communities is alive and well, and it's
Mhm.
also alive and well inside our communities. And I feel, I mean, I can't prove it, but it's mostly women who are at the top of these organizations that are keeping and have kept me, I'll speak about my experience, out, because I can feel it. Like I can feel like I've tried so hard to be myself and still be respectful and be loving. But if I have a different opinion than you, I'm going to want to share it. Like, why wouldn't we want to talk about how we see things differently? Like
Yes.
we're not like an army or something, but it's like I've been described as loose cannon, and that whole, oh, don't hire her, don't get her. That has to do with because I won't be controlled.
Yeah.
I can cooperate with you for sure. Like I'll put my shoulder to the truck if it's stuck in the mud and push till I can't push anymore. But I won't be bossed or controlled. And that's, I think, a very Indigenous characteristic. In being in Disney, I own myself.
Mhm.
Those old ladies you talk about, that's what they teach you, is that you're strong and you're the one who's, you're responsible for your life. And so I'm in therapy about it. I mean, for real. For reals, my young kids say, like, I know because I can feel it when I bump into powerful Indigenous women. Not all of them, not all. You can feel it. It's a feeling. That's the sneaky jealousy you were talking about. And so I believe that there's like a moose in the room that we're not talking about our role as Indigenous women in our own oppression within our communities. Like, women get in power behind those men and then keep anybody else out. They're like the generals for those men in power, is what I think. And
Mm.
I don't know if they know they're doing that. Like, do you think they know? Do you think
Some
they're
do.
doing?
Some do.
Yeah.
Yeah, they know what they're doing. And it's I mean, I'm in my 60s now, and I did excellent work when I was, out in Treaty 7. I did excellent work, in Manitoba. And I've always said to whatever community has hired me, I will pass on these skills so you don't have to, hire somebody to do this
Hmm.
work, right?
Hmm.
And and it's I mean, if you make a mistake, then you make a mistake and you learn from it.
Yeah.
But and some communities will blacklist you.
Mm.
They will say, well, no, she did this wrong, blah blah blah, and sometimes it's half truths, right?
Mm.
How the heck can you make the government um, give you funding that you need when everybody else is struggling for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's the other thing, is that being on a blacklist because you made a mistake, or people have this idea, oh, she thinks she's so good. I've heard that.
Ah. Yeah.
Thinking, what? Like, where the heck does that come from?
Yeah.
So, and it's like I said, my elders, my mom, my aunts tell me, just keep going,
Mm-hmm.
be the person you are.
Mm. Mm.
So,
I think too, like the blacklist in Indian country, I know that in some circles I'm definitely on it. Because again, like I said, I can feel it. And the blacklist is not overt. It's not like okay, they're in the boardroom, they're talking about should we hire Joan Jack, or whatever, or Marcella Fontaine, should we hire them? It's not like somebody in the room is gonna say, no, don't hire her. Maybe that does happen on occasion, but I think what happens is the support is not forthcoming.
mhm.
And so that's the sneaky part of it. Like, because our culture is more subtle and not always direct, people also use those behaviors in a negative way where they just, and I just had a memory of, I applied for this job in Manitoba, um, with my own tribal council. And then I was called by a board member who said, please don't ever tell anyone I called you. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to name her name here. And, uh, and then I said, what are you calling me for? Like, I knew I didn't get the position. And she said, I feel so bad. She said, I feel so bad. Because she said, you were the successful candidate on doing their process, their bureaucratic process, but two of the chiefs didn't want you. So then the board said, no, we'll just take this second one. And so that kind of stuff happens. I'm sure it happens outside Indian country, but in our world, where in Indian country, where we tell everyone we're giving mixed messages, we say, go to school, go to school, go to school, learn, learn, learn. And then people come back to the community and then they're like shit on. And so what the hell is that? Like, it's like these same people that are saying, yes, go to school, won't hire you because you become a threat to their power. So let's try to talk a little bit about, besides, taking the high road and growing us, which is for sure what we need to do, grow personally. Each of us grow personally in response to our challenges. For sure, we have to do that. Um, but what do you think needs to happen in our communities so that we move? I feel like we're stuck. I mean, there's conversations about lateral violence that are being undertaken by people who are laterally violent.
I yeah, I like right currently, I'm working on the Indian residential school ground search project for our community. And when people talk about trauma, they talk about oppression, intergenerational trauma, and the amounts of racism that we go through, right? Um, And I'll admit it. I used to be, used to say, well, those are just buzzwords, right?
Mm.
Um, but I really learned a lot, through training, attending workshops. My youngest daughter actually has educated me in so many ways about trauma and, colonization. And I'm really proud of her because she's a younger version of me back in my
Ah,
30s, where, firecracker and won't put up with stuff. But I think all of those, issues are now just hitting, where, you know, we can talk about the trauma and the oppression and the colonization and especially the amount of racism that we go through, right?
mhm,
And so, and people are dealing with it, they're either dealing with it individually or as families. So, and I respect that, and I really encourage and, still support, uh, especially young women, because I really feel at times they're the ones that need our help the most, right? To
mhm,
guide them and to support them.
mhm,
And, if you can even reach one, I mean, that's great, right? But
mhm,
all of these issues have been, talked about, but I think it's really coming to a head now where communities, organizations are dealing with it, you know.
mhm,
And I always think of, I'm so proud of Jennifer Wood,
mm,
for sharing her story and what she's been through and how she's advocating. And, she's, to me, she's a friend and will help you when you need it. So,
mhm,
and those stories are coming out, and there's a lot of other women who, are sharing their stories and what they went
mhm,
through.
mhm.
So I think that's a big starting process for, our communities in, how to deal with that trauma that you've been through,
Yeah.
right? And I think that and some men, have changed, but I think our leadership, which are mostly male, have to change their way of thinking as well.
Mhm.
And, they need to be more supportive,
Yeah.
and they need to acknowledge that, hey, we have all these strong, educated women in our communities.
Mhm,
Why are we not, either honoring them or sitting down with them and having an open discussion, right?
mhm,
Because when we talk about our future generations, we need to be inclusive as male and female because of that balance, right?
mhm,
And our young people need that
mhm,
rather than, this jealousy, this revenge attitude. That's not right.
mhm, mhm,
And, we need to, however, we teach our, our children, especially our grandchildren, has an effect, on
mhm.
things that are being done.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
we have to be mindful of that because our kids learn from us, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the things I've been thinking about for years is that, because of mono and because of oppression, we end up being really conflict averse. Like we just don't want to move through conflict for those reasons. The generational impact of racism and colonialism and our own cultural view of just let it go and just you know because the other thing that you hear in our language is papa continue. Like when I'm acting out of turn, I remember as a child, my dad actually, who was non-indigenous but a fluent speaker, would say to me, "Papa, continue, like you're gonna hurt yourself," and like so. This collective accountability is always in our paradigm. The idea that we're always in relationship and there's always an accountability that exists in our paradigm. And so, one of the things I think is really needed is the opportunity, like workshops and training at the grassroots level and at the leadership level, about how to move through conflict. How to move through conflict because we just don't have the skills to do it. I mean, sometimes you can get in a sacred circle, a sharing circle, and I've seen those in the healing movement from the residential and day schools where people will really adhere to our own conflict resolution paradigm in that context of the sacred circle where you don't interrupt anyone. There's no cross talking. Like there's no, like you don't, if Marcella shared and then it's my turn to share, I don't say, well, Marcella, that's not what really happened. You know, we don't do any of that in the sacred circle. But building on that, there needs to be the development, and it's urgent. It's urgent because we just have these conflicts with people we love every day, and then we don't resolve them. We don't resolve them. And they turn into resentments, and they turn into the jealousy, and they turn into the revenge. And I really, as a part of Indigenous governance, I really believe strongly there's a need for a push to develop conflict resolution processes and skills, you know, in our communities. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's what's needed, right?
Yeah.
Because people still have to protect themselves regardless,
Yeah.
right? And a lot of people I've heard say, well, that's not our way. Well, excuse me, you're not using our ways anyway. So, um, so there
You made me laugh.
more and more, I think it's coming out where there's policies and procedures for a reason. And it's there to protect.
But then what I've seen happen in some communities is they do have those policies and procedures and people file grievances and then nothing happens.
Yes, exactly. So
full stop. Done.
It has to go further.
All the way through. Yes. And that's where the system, the development of the system and the skills to resolve conflict comes in. And that's not happening yet that I know of anywhere.
Yeah.
People are just doing their best to survive. And I know yesterday, I don't know if, and all of this stuff, the lateral violence, the sneaky jealousy, I don't know how it impacts your health, but I'm working really hard to not be impacted so deeply by all of this personally, but I am. It impacts my mental health. And I can get on that track in my mind, like about thinking about an injustice or whatever, and then my stomach starts to hurt, and like literally I feel I'm impacted in my body, and in my mind. Like I feel hopeless, I feel scared, I feel angry, and I have all of these negative feelings that impact my physical health. And so that's also what not dealing with this is doing to our people. Because if it's happening to me, it's got to be happening to other people. Do you think you've been impacted? Your physical, mental, spiritual health has been impacted by all of this in the community?
Yes, and I have removed myself. I mean, for health reasons as well, right? I have removed myself from toxic environments, toxic people. I focus on staying positive. I smudge, I pray. I was telling my brother, I said, "Oh my God, I've never prayed so much in my life." But so all of those things help me keep positive, as well as my grandkids. When I'm starting to feel like negative, or I want to feel sorry for myself, we all do that, right? I take comfort in my grandkids because they're so innocent, right? So yeah, I've gone through that too, where my body just wants to give up. But you have to keep going, right?
I also think there's even a link between all of this unresolved. I would be so bold as to say that there's actually a link between our leadership and community members not dealing with conflict resolution and addiction in our communities. Because you often hear people saying, I've often heard people saying, "Well, own it. I'm not going to those meetings. All you guys do is fight. Like, why would I want to go to those meetings?" And those are our young people, and they're just drunk and high, and they're finding their own solution to the impact of colonization affecting our governments, and I really believe that all of this nasty power, closed circles of power that exist in our communities, and I'm not saying all leaders are bad. There are good leaders out there, and it's not any one singular person. It's like the whole thing needs to be detoxified, like how when you detox something as a whole, that's what has to happen in our communities, like a community-wide detox, so that we all kind of get a clean slate somehow, or a cleaner slate, because our young people are picking the solution of just staying drunk and high, and then they're dying, and because they're like, well, what am I going to be like that? I don't want to be like that. And you work in the healing field. Like, what do you think of what I'm saying? The link to addiction.
Our addictions are getting worse. And I've heard a lot of leadership talk about that as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's unfortunate, but it's happening. And I mean, you know, I've experienced it, personally, and it made me, want to do more to help. Um, my daughter's a recovering addict, and I used to be ashamed to say that, but
Mm.
I'm not anymore
Mm.
because, I'm human
Yeah.
and I helped my daughter and I was fortunate enough to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Very proud of her. She's been clean for 6 years now.
Yay.
And, um, so one way or another, we're all affected by it.
Mm-hmm.
And, I continue to advocate. I will help especially young moms, because, when you have children and you're suffering with an addiction, that's very hard. And, you know, it's, and I'm not bragging about this, but I've helped young moms, financially, emotionally,
Mm-hmm.
put them in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
And it means the world to them, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And the one thing that I've learned through everything that I've gone through, don't judge people.
Mm.
Don't judge anybody, because
Mm.
that's the worst thing that you can do,
Mm.
and it's very hard, especially on our young people.
Mm.
And we
It
just
is.
need to be there to support them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
So
Yeah. And I do think that there is an element of our behavior as the responsible adults in the community, whether we're, elders or leaders or mothers or fathers, in our failure to address some of the really hard issues. I do believe strongly that it's impacting our younger people, because they don't see any hope in our behavior, and individually they find hope, like from the people that you've helped. They find hope through you, but I think that's also a larger issue that needs to be dealt with. Like, leaders need to realize that you can't just go to a meeting and talk about how concerned you are about the young people, and then frickin' drive by them on the res as if they don't exist. you know. And so
yes.
I'm reminded of I'm probably going to piss a bunch of people off, but I don't care. Whatever. They don't have to listen to my podcast. I was in Barron's one time, and I was driving by, and this guy was drunk, obviously, and I stopped for him. And I'm not saying everybody should stop for drunks. I'm saying I do, and unless I feel like I don't want to. And so I stopped for this guy, and he got in the truck, and he said, "Oh, Joan Jack." People at home use my whole name. They say Joan Jack. And I said, "Hi, David." Let's say his name was David, and he was half cut. And I said, "How are you doing?" He said, "Oh," he said, I'm so hangover," he said, "and I think I'm still kind of half cut." But he said, "I don't know, Joan." He said, "4 preachers drove by me and nobody stopped." He said, "I thought they were Jesus's pal. What the heck?" And I was like, oh my God. Like,
Um
there's a real disconnection between the speak of our leaders, whether they're political or religious or spiritual. Even in the ceremonial community, I've felt the gaslighting, not quite Indian enough for this sweat lodge. And so that whole behavior and the speaking that we do, and then the disconnect to our people on the ground. There's just a disconnect.
Yeah.
And now lateral violence is being used as a reason to disconnect. Lately, I've been hearing people in positions of authority say, well, people have to act, they're being laterally violent. I can't help people who are laterally violent. I'm like, yo-ho, yeah, what is that now?
Yes.
Another way to bastardize an idea and disconnect yourself from those you purport to support.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's just not right.
Yeah.
I just want to thank you so much, Marcella, because doing this is fulfilling a need in me to speak. And I'm okay with that. And I didn't want to just do like a lecture series or something. I love visiting. I'm like I got my master's in visiting. Maybe a PhD in visiting. So I just really can't thank you enough. I know you're not feeling that well right now.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate you still stepping up and standing for what you believe. And I just really, really thank you. And on the West Coast here, they say, I'll hold my hands up to you, Yeah. So thank you so much, Marcella. And if you can think of anybody else, that I should have a chat with, let's do that.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
Miigwech.